We're really pleased to be running this happy hour session for you this afternoon. This is the penultimate webinar in our autumn winter series, and we'll have one more next week, a little bit more about that later on. For today's programme, which is very much a partnership with the Dementia and Housing Working Group, and we're delighted that several of the members of that group are with us also this afternoon, both as delegates as well as presenting today. It builds on a 2020-21 report that the All-Party Parliamentary Group on Housing and Care for Older People undertook as part of an inquiry into, are we ready for dementia friendliness in our housing stock? And what we've done with DHWG is really to start crafting a programme of learning and improvement and sharing what's happening, but also taking forward some of the recommendations from that APPG paper. So as part of today's session, we've sort of crafted the programme to look at a number of different issues. Some of this is around design and thinking about how we can adapt our existing stock. And we're joined by Rachel Russell, Head of Regional Advice at Foundations. I'm sure she needs no introduction to many of you. An organisation that's really started to champion age friendliness and look at that in terms of becoming dementia friendly themselves is Accent Housing. And delighted that Lizzy Robinson, the Specialist Housing Manager, and Tanya Scott, the Head of Specialist Housing there, can participate this afternoon. I'm aware you're also being fully engaged with several of the DHWG members, in particular around some of the work in West Yorkshire. And last but not least, we're delighted that Jacob could talk this afternoon, building on the work that Pozzoni Architects have been doing, in particular around designing for new properties and new dwellings. And you're part of the later living team. And we again got a long-standing relationship with Pozzoni, who are sponsors of our dementia, co-sponsors of our dementia pages on our website. Well, you've not come to hear me talk, you've come to hear our fantastic group of panelists talk. So without further ado, I am going to pass over to Rachel.
Thank you, Jeremy. I'm just going to share my screen, so just bear with me as I hopefully share it. Yep, is that sharing, Sally?
Yes, yeah, that's perfect. Thank you.
Lovely. Yeah, just a huge thank you to HousingLIN and the team just for inviting Foundations along this afternoon. Just to those that are less familiar about the work that we do at Foundations, we are on behalf of the Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government in England, the national advisory body for disabled facilities grant, home improvement agencies and handy person services. So this afternoon, I'm just going to talk a little bit about the use of the disabled facilities grant, some of the things in terms of thinking about design and adaptations, and how we can use the DFG to support some of that work going forward. So just those that are less familiar with the Disabled Facilities Grant, it is a wonderful grant that sits within housing legislation, sits within the Housing Grants Construction and Regeneration Act, and it is a grant that is available to adults, children with physical, cognitive and sensory disabilities impairments. And it has 12 very specific purposes for which it can provide adaptations, which is about supporting people to remain in their own homes, supporting functional independence and accessibility and safety. And we know that people with dementia certainly need adaptations to, keep them independent, living safely at home. There is a mandatory grant, but there is the regulatory reform order that does give some flexibility to enable local authorities to use their DFG allocation that it gets every year from the ministry. And I will talk a little bit later about how some local authorities provide grants for people with dementia. Adaptations is very much in terms of government policy. It's going to play a significant part as we move from shifting from that sickness to prevention agenda and supporting people to live independently at home. And what you've got at the top of the slide here are the two objectives from the Better Care Fund framework for this year. And for this year, government is investing over £711 million to local authorities to provide adaptations to, as I say, to achieve those two objectives that it has, to keep people independent at home and move from that sickness to prevention agenda. Why do adaptations matter to people with dementia? So I am an occupational therapist by background, but I'm also somebody that is now supporting a parent. So my dad has got dementia, so I'm very much living this at the moment, and I recognise how important my dad's home environment is to him as he's on this journey with dementia. We know for people with dementia that their home environment is such an important part in terms of supporting their independence and supporting their well-being. And what we know, when we design adaptations thoughtfully, and I think that's the crucial point there, is designing adaptation thoughtfully, what we can help is, certainly for people with dementia, that we can reduce the cognitive burden that home environments can cause people with dementia. So we know through designing adaptations well, we can reduce confusion, really support somebody's independence, prevent falls, support those that are supporting people with dementia, and ultimately help people stay within their homes for longer. And the goal ultimately in terms of adapting people's homes is actually creating that environment that compensates for the cognitive as well as motor changes that we see with people with dementia. And it's all about preserving dignity, choice and familiarity. And I'm sure the other speakers this afternoon will very much kind of highlight these points as well. So that's why home adaptations matter for people with dementia. One of the benefits of actually adapting existing homes is that already people with dementia are living in an environment that is very familiar to them. So if we can adapt their homes, overcome some of those architectural barriers that might be impacting on safety and function, then it just helps keep people connected to their routines, so preserves their everyday activities, as well as those social connections that they'll have living within that neighbourhood that they've often lived in for decades. So that's one of the joys of being able to use adaptations to keep people within their homes, because you can really tailor those adaptations and keep people familiar within their environments that they're living in. And often adaptations can often be a quicker solution than somebody having to think about actually moving within their own home environment. So that's one of the benefits of actually keeping and adapting and using the Disabled Facilities Grant to provide those adaptations. However, one of the challenges that we have, though, in terms of adapting people's homes is that we know that lots of the housing stock that exists was designed prior to ever having a really good understanding about the design needs of people with dementia. So I'm sure that the work that Jacob will talk about will be highlighting actually how we can design environments from the get-go that support people with a range of cognitive impairments, not just for individuals with dementia. So we know one of the constraints about adapting people's homes is that often there's just the physical constraints that we might not be able to do the adaptations that we need to do. Also, large adaptations can be really disruptive as well. And actually sometimes trying to anticipate needs can be another challenge, which often if you're designing from, a new build, you can kind of design out those features that might become a problem in the existing housing stock. I've just got these slides. I won't dwell on them too much, but what I just wanted to talk about is some of the common architectural barriers that we experience when we're working with people in existing housing stock, and some of the challenges that we have is often layouts aren't designed to support people with dementia. So simple things like toilets not being visible from the main living spaces, so that orientation is often quite challenging within existing layouts, so helping that orientation. Lighting, again, in lots of homes, the lighting isn't brilliant, so we've got dim hallways, and as we know, good lighting is fundamental in terms of supporting orientation, glare and those bits and pieces that we know can be a real problems. Things around flooring, stairs are often a key barrier in terms of people's homes, and we've got some issues that you can have around stairs. Through to things like doors and thresholds not having contrasting, so making that navigation through doors and bits and pieces. The kind of barriers that you experience within bathrooms and kitchens for people with dementia, and you know, garden spaces are so important for people with dementia, but often we can have lots of access issues around. So those are the kind of common architectural barriers that we often see within existing housing stock that can be an issue for people with dementia. So when we're thinking about using the DHWG well, and thinking about how we can adapt people's homes, then these are some of the kind of principles that we can implement so that we're designing adaptations. So we go back to that first slide and you know, thoughtfully designing adaptations for people with dementia. So it's about, you know, working with people's existing routines and preferences so that we're providing adaptations that are familiar to them, keeping adaptations and fixtures and fittings really simple, really good lighting, so making best use of lighting, reducing shadows and confusion, making the best use of contrasting as well when you're looking at adaptations. Building in calm use of colours, and I know my good colleague Marnie Walker has just recently done her PhD around design and use of colours and personalisation, and again making sure we're building those things into adaptations. So it's about them making sure that when we're using adaptations, we're matching the adaptation to the functional needs of people. So thinking about if people have got memory and sequencing problems, the types of solutions that we can be using, so labelling, contrasting. If people have got difficulties with spatial awareness, again, the kind of things that we can be looking at in terms of contrasting, consistent flooring and those types of things. Again, how we can be using safety, risk and improving and using adaptations to do that. Adaptations that can help reduce nighttime disorientation, and I've got some suggestions as well there, as well as things, really simple solutions that we can use to prevent mobility or enhancing mobility and reducing the risk of falls that we can often find that will occur for people with dementia. What we do know is, so this is just some data around actually the primary impairments for people applying for DHWG. And if you think about the number of people with dementia, actually, when we look at primary impairments, then often we're not seeing as many people with dementia accessing the DHWG. And I think that's because when we look at the wording of the purposes, those of you that are familiar with DHWG, you'll be aware that often it talks about access, and yeah, and I think when we think about access, I think that unconscious bias is that we think about physical impairment, but we know that the home environment can just be as inaccessible for those with sensory as well as cognitive impairment. So I think for us at Foundations, we'd like to see more people with dementia accessing that. So back in 2022, the government did publish guidance around DHWG, and dementia does make an appearance in the DHWG guidance, particularly around thinking about how we can use assistive technology and the flexible use of DHWG. So local authorities do have flexibility around how they use the DHWG, and we know there's around about 45 local authorities that have housing assistance policies that have got very specific dementia grants that provide, usually smaller adaptations to make the home suitable. So again, if anybody out there is thinking about actually, if you're updating your housing assistance policy, have a think about how you might use dementia grants to support those individuals with dementia. Just to kind of finish off very quickly, is that we've done at Foundation some work around home automation. So we've actually got a guide around how we can use the DHWG to support home automation. So please have a look at that guide, because it goes through the different ways in which we can use home automation to support people with dementia. So things around prompts and reminders, safety monitoring. I know that's something that we very much use with my dad, and how we're using that in a fantastic way to keep him independent, and as well as supporting us as carers, lighting and bits and pieces that we can do around home automation and temperature and comfort. So please have a look at that guide, because we've really thought about, you know, kind of dementia and how home automation and the use of the DHWG. Again, some bits around communication and reassurance, supporting carers, and the key things around when you're looking at home automation. So I appreciate that that's been 12 minutes of lots of information. I will put some links in for you to have a look on our website as well, but hopefully that's given some food for thought this afternoon around adaptations, and certainly in England how we can use the DHWG to support some of that. So huge thank you to Sally and Jeremy for inviting me along this afternoon. Yeah, so I'll just stop sharing and hand back to Sally and Jeremy. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Rachel. That's a really good introductory and element. And thanks also for qualifying that this is for England. You've been, I can't remember whether there's a similar arrangement for DFGs in Wales and Scotland, but I think they are separate, but follow a similar path.
Yes, the legislation around DFG is similar, but there are differences in Wales and Northern Ireland, and it's a very different picture in Scotland in terms of provision of adaptations. Yeah.
Yeah, no, thanks for that. So I think what you've done is really share with us some very useful personal information, but also practical tools and tips, as well as setting it in the context of the DFG process as well. And I know that we were pulling together the APPG report, the work of foundations, and sort of the considerations about how we can sort of support people living with dementia and their carers and families much more effectively through adaptations came to the fore. But also one of the key recommendations of that was about dementia friendliness and how organisations should become dementia friendly. And I know while foundations have done a lot of work with that with your home improvement agency members, we're also going to hear now from a housing associations that's taken the bull by the horns. So Tanya and Lizzy, over to you.
Thanks,
Thank
Jeremy.
you, Jeremy. Just share my screen. Can everyone see that okay?
Yep, that's obviously.
Fantastic. Okay, so I'm just going to go through an introduction as to what we're going to go through today, Tanya and I. So we're kind of sharing a bit of this out. So like Jeremy says, we work for Accent Housing, a housing association. I'm going to go through an introduction. Tanya's going to cover some of the partnership working that we do, Accent's journey, some learning that we've had so far, and then I'm going to cover some of our next steps. So just by way of introduction, so I'm Lizzy Robinson. I'm the specialist housing manager for our northern regions at Accent. I look after our specialist housing from Barrow in the northwest, right across to Scarborough in the northeast, and our properties in Yorkshire that come in between that. I've worked at Accent for 8 years, initially working in our general needs stock, and recently joined the specialist housing team in the summer. I'm really proud to be a dementia champion and lead at Accent. My granddad suffered with dementia and lived in a sheltered housing scheme, as it were then. And whilst that was a number of years ago, it adds to my passion to contribute to us getting this right as a housing association. Tanya Scott, as I mentioned, who's on with me today, she's the head of specialist housing at Accent and has been in her role for about 2.5 years now. Prior to Tanya joining us at Accent, specialist housing and those properties and customers were handled within our general needs parameters and processes. Since Tanya joined, this has now been separated out, which has given us much more focus to ensure we can deliver what we need to for our customers and that specific customer group that we work with. That group within specialist housing is predominantly independent living for over 55-year-olds. And in addition to that, we do have some supported and some temporary accommodation. The maps on the screen kind of show the spread of our homes. Like I say, we are a national organisation, so we've got around 22,000 homes in total and about 50 specialist housing schemes nationally. With us being a national organisation, it does mean that we work with a number of local authorities across the country, which can be a challenge at times, and obviously different things apply to different local authorities. I'll now hand you over to Tanya to go through some of the other things that we've been doing around our dementia-friendly journey. And if you just let me know, Tanya, I'll move the slides on.
Okay, thanks, Lizzie. So if you move on a couple of slides over to the next one. So I want to talk a little bit about our partnership, and I guess that's how come we ended up coming and talking today. Is we were asked by the West Yorkshire Housing Partnership Group if we would come along and talk about Accent journey so far. And it is, well, I would probably say, whilst we've been on a journey, it still feels like we're at the beginning of it. But just a little bit about the West Yorkshire Housing Partnership Group. So it consists of 15 other housing associations. It was set up in 2022, and we've been part of that group since the beginning. But our development colleagues were on it from the beginning, which I think really served a really good purpose. But myself and Lizzie have joined more recently, probably about 3-4 months ago. And again, I think it probably to drive that passion and what we really need to do and embed within Accent. So the group, what does the group do? So it mainly focuses on influencing, signposting, data gathering, and better supporting dementia awareness. And I think I've probably undersold what the group does, because it works tirelessly at improving quality of lives, and how housing really approaches how they consider the bills of the property and the delivery of the services. And each partner of the group has a champion. So Accent's got 2 champions. It's got myself and Lizzie, who then, which I'll come on to a little while later, around how we lead that within Accent. So next slide, Lizzie, please. I'm going to go over this slide really quickly. In terms of the work they do, it draws upon a number of key documents, and these are 3 of the key documents it draws upon. So Rachel talked about the DHWG, which is mentioned there, and then there is obviously the other documents as well that it draws upon. So in the recommendations which were in these documents is what drives our approach of how we do things within that group, and in particular for us within Accent. Next slide, Lizzie. So what the role of the dementia champions within that group is around raising the awareness and signposting, communication and policies, and how we do that wider than our housing association, but also making sure that we are really embedding that within our properties and our buildings and how we deliver our services, and embedding those principles and bringing back the training and the knowledge and what's shared within that group back to our housing associations. Next slide, Lizzie, please. And one of the biggest things, and I'm going to pull on, talk about this a little bit later with what we do within Accent. So what they've developed is dementia-ready housing design criteria. So it's got 10 criteria that's deemed as best practice that's been drawn upon from those key documents. And this is part of the toolkit that it's developed around being able to assess design and delivery against these principles and linking in back to what Rachel was talking about, to try and support people to be able to live within their home and live fulfilled lives for much longer, to prevent that disruption. Next slide, Lizzy, please. So Accent's journey. So I'm going to just, whilst a lot of this is about design, and I'm going to talk about Accent's design around general needs, because we haven't actually been, and we haven't got any plans in the near future, but hopefully not so distant future, to build new specialist accommodation. We have got a lot of accommodation that isn't too late to look at how we can do things differently, and to look and review and how we can do. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that, but I'm going to also focus on what we've done from a colleague and customer perspective as well, and operational as an organisation. So we have that photos, actually I visited a mocked up property up in Walker, a longevity home that Benicia had done in partnership with the Northumberland University, and it was really insightful to take a lot of learning around what we can do to support people within their current homes without actually even considering new builds. So we've done a lot of collaboration. And we've done, we are part of the, as I mentioned there, we're part of the Dementia Champions Network, and with our sole purpose around enhancing quality of life, not just from a new build perspective, but with our existing customers and what we can do to make things better. One of the things that the 3 documents relate to, that is pulled from the network and the partnership, is around making small changes make big differences, and that's what our focus is from Accent. Is not necessarily about making those big changes and focusing on the smaller changes. Next slide, Lizzy, please. So we have we've done a lot of training internally, and we've really embraced the training from Alzheimer's Society to be able to help us with that. And the people that were trained in that training, if I'm honest, this was around about 18 months ago we started our training journey, and it really did a 180 on our thoughts and direction. It was really interesting. So I think that was a really key starting point. It really challenged our action plan and our direction of travel as an organisation, of how we're going to approach that. Thinking about our colleagues as a starting point, what we realise is that actually there are key drivers to make us to become a dementia-friendly organisation, is to get all colleagues on board, but also appreciating colleagues' own challenges and their own personal journeys with dementia. So we have implemented what we call a dementia cafe, that is led and supported by those that were trained, and that is quarterly meetings where colleagues can go to the virtual cafe to talk about their experiences and the support and the challenges, so we can support them as colleagues internally to be able to manage their challenges. And we talk about a lot around the difficulties around assessment, getting time off work, etc., so we can effectively support those colleagues. We are building on our internal dementia leads, so I think that was something that, and I'm going to come on to the key learning, but no man's an island, or whatever that saying is around I can't do, me and Lizzy can't do this on our own. And this is not just about specialist housing, this is about housing across the board. It's about our customers and it's about our colleagues. So we really need to have key colleagues from every department. And we've gone back to the basics to develop our internal leads at all different levels to influence our approach going forward. And what's helped us with that as well is a visit to the Centre of Excellence at Kirklees. And if you have not visited there, I highly recommend it. It was a real eye-opener just to get the brilliant basics and going back to making the small changes around things like signage, lighting, and things like that. It's really key. The small changes make the biggest difference. Next slide, Lizzy, please. So did you skip a slide, Lizzy? That's fine if we have, because I think well, we did. No, it's all right, it's fine, we have, you're right. Thank you for that.
It's just that.
Yeah, so just in terms of our challenges, and I'm nearly finished and move over to Lizzy for the next steps. Our biggest challenge was around having too big ambitious action plan, and it was really important to come back to simplifying that around what's achievable. We sharing the responsibility with key roles, and I like to keep talking about making the small changes, having people in departments not just around development and our development colleagues. It was having people like our comms team on that journey as well. Our development team have recently designed and delivered 4 new schemes, and they did assess themselves against those 10 criteria. So we decided that we'll use 2 to 9 of the criteria to assess ourselves against, and 3 out of the 4 schemes all was scored 9 out of 10. So we met the 9 of the principles out of the 10, with the exception of 1, which was one of our earlier schemes. It was 6 out of 10. So we're really proud of even general needs of being able to develop our properties to be able to future-proof for our customers. I will then hand over now to Lizzy for the next steps.
Thank you. So next steps wise, so in January, we're bringing together departments and getting the departmental dementia leads to look at improvement sessions so we can get a clearer action plan on things that we can achieve across the organisation. And through that, we want to outline key responsibilities and key actions. We intend to provide training for our customers in our independent living schemes around becoming dementia friendly, and to do that, we want to educate them to enable them a greater understanding for identification purposes, because ultimately they're the people that live in our homes and they're the people that live on site and may see things that we might not. So we think that would be a good area to work on. We're recruiting someone, I think Tanya alluded to this, from our internal communications team, just to help us to enhance and deliver on what we are setting out to achieve. And finally, the ongoing staff training, we just want to make sure it's relevant to the staff that are receiving the training, and that training is beyond just e-learning that we've perhaps had in the past. Housing standards to be dementia friendly, and we're in the process of reviewing all of our current schemes to look at any quick wins and things that we can do right now, which again, I think Tanya alluded to. And that's us.
Thank you very much. That was a really highly informative presentations, you two, and thanks ever so for sharing both your journey, but also some of the next steps that you're taking. That's really helpful, and also in the context what's happening regionally as well. And we're going to move from sort of West Yorkshire over to the northwest, where Jacob, I think, is based, and another area where a lot of work has been done to create much more thoughtful and inclusive approaches to designing for the people who are living with dementia. And Jacob, you're going to talk much more from an architectural background, but I'm also conscious that in Greater Manchester, the Mayor has supported the work of Dementia United, for example, and I'm sure several of the schemes that you kind of refer to are clustered around some of that work as well. So over to you, Jacob.
Thanks, Jeremy. Just share my screen. Can we all see that okay?
Yeah,
yep.
I see that fine.
Brill. Excellent. All right, thank you all. Thanks, Lizzy. Thanks, Tanya, for that. And I'm just going to talk a little bit now. So I'm an architect working in the later living team here at Pozzoni, and I'd like to start with a bit of background about Pozzoni as a practice. We were established in 1983. We're based in Altrincham in the northwest with a smaller satellite office in Brighton, and we deliver a number of projects throughout the UK. We're spread across a number of sectors, which includes residential, commercial, leisure, education, and later living. We've designing homes since our inception for housing associations and the private sector, with a strong emphasis on retirement accommodation. In terms of our approach, the later living team and residential team focus is on ageing in urban environments. Our practice and approach is based on research, and this arrives in a number of ways, whether that's through lived experience, various types of projects completed, or a number of study tours looking at best practice towards dementia and intergenerational design across different cultures. Over the years, the practice has established a wealth of knowledge, and in turn, this has seen Pozzoni contribute to a number of publications. So over the course of the next 10 or so minutes, we'll be discussing a couple of topics that include exploring designing for dementia, some high-level principles, and then some principles in practice. And we'll be touching on a couple of case studies, Belong Chester and the household model, and our scheme on the former Sinclair's house site, Redbridge. So initially, I'd just like to discuss, I'd like to briefly look through some of the high-level dementia design principles we look to implement. The design of environments for both housing and care settings should look to address cognitive difficulties people may experience because of dementia, create a positive and social environment by providing meaningful engagement with daily life, provide a physical environment that supports the changing needs of residents as they age in place, create a homely and easy to navigate environment, encourage orientation and wayfinding, support independence, reduce confusion and overstimulation, foster comfort, well-being and dignity, and design schemes that promote inclusivity and accessibility. So I want to cover, I'd like to touch upon some of the more architectural aspects that backs up and supports these principles. Here I've included a couple of examples, or a number of examples. However, as we're limited on time, I'm just going to sort of cherry pick a few to cover in a bit more detail. Initially, I'd like to start designing bedrooms, bathrooms. It's important, or we feel it's important to design bedrooms from the perspective of a person entering the bedroom. A view of the ensuite door and WC pan should be clear, and an uninterrupted view from the bed head to an external space is very important. The view of the WC pan and assistive technology is a visual cue for residents, particularly those living with dementia who may need a memory aid. The view of external space is incredibly important for well-being and their circadian rhythm. We try to ensure all bedrooms have a view which looks onto the main secure resident garden. At ground floor, these bedrooms would also feature external doors with small private terrace areas because we feel the visual amenity is very important. It is, however, important that the views from these spaces do not draw focus to areas beyond the safe and secure lines, as this can sometimes cause stress, frustration, and lead to obsessive behaviours on reaching that space that they can achieve. Sill heights are important within these spaces, so low sills are often set to enable views to be enjoyed from a standing, seated, or whilst laying in bed. So they've always got that kind of view towards nature and that view through out of the window. Furniture within the rooms is designed to look homely, but accounts for physical impairments, and when fitted will allow hoists to be tracked around the room and provides adequate storage for residents' belongings and personal items to be displayed. It's also helpful to have space next to the wardrobes for, say, the following day's change of clothes, so that perhaps they're easily reachable for the residents and they can begin to, continue to dress themselves accordingly. And touching upon bathrooms, the room is to be designed obviously as a bathroom. Thought should be given to using familiar fittings such as separate hot and cold taps to avoid confusion of singular pillar tap. The flush mechanism to toilet should be familiar and usable by someone with impaired dexterity. The WC pan height should be taller than standard, and the shower controls are beneficial to be sited outside of the shower line to ensure the person can be assisted during the shower without the carer having to kind of stand within the shower with them. The rooms to be large enough to enable hoist access and support from either left or right hand side, and the decor should clearly delineate between floor, walls, sanitary ware and vanity units. Layout to ensure WC pan is visible from the bed head is important, with assistive lighting may be installed that illuminates the bathroom during the night should a resident wake or move from the bed as a visual cue, and to allow low-level lighting to avoid trips and falls. I'm going to touch on mirrors and reflections. So in private bathrooms, the option to install or remove mirrors from bedrooms and en-suites is advised. If a person's regressed to an earlier point in their life, they may not recognise the person in the mirror, causing distress. Others may enjoy seeing a person or believing it's a companion or friend. Others may recognise who they are and have no issue with their age, appearance, and want to mirror. It's an entirely subjective situation and may alter the longer the person is living with dementia. The key is to have that choice for the individual's comfort and well-being. It is, however, advisable to avoid mirrored surfaces around various day spaces and other areas, if possible. This is so the residents not deterred from enjoying those and using those communal spaces. Touching on colourways, first and foremost, the colour schemes are to be homely and create the feeling of well-being when the care environment. Contrasting colours is key between surfaces, so furniture stands out from floors, walls. Doors in walls for access are obvious and clear, and doors not intended for the residents' access, staff doors blend in with wall colours. Wall junctions are clear against floor and ceiling levels, and patterns not too busy that can cause visual confusion or raise anxiety levels. Heavily patterned carpets, as with shadowing, can create illusions of steps or holes, and changes in levels are to be avoided. Sound. So soft furnishings can be used to counter harder floor finishes. Room proportions and building fabric are important considerations to ensure noise levels are maintained at an appropriate level. Loud noises or constant background distractions can be unsettling for residents. And then touching on a couple more, in terms of sensory and memory cues, personalisation of space is an important factor, and bedrooms need to allow residents a level of personalisation. It's important for residents to experience sensory and memory aids to help make sense of surroundings, feelings, or establish routine. And then moving forward, I will just look to touch on our next slide and I'd like to discuss briefly a couple of our case studies where we've implemented a number of these practices. So first up, I'd like to present the household model. This was developed with our long-term client Belong. For those who are unaware, Belong are a large care provider across the UK who implement this model and deliver care successfully across all of their villages. Residential care is provided in small households, up to 12 people, to create a community within a community, with an extended family feel where residents and colleagues build good relationships and enjoy a calm and homely atmosphere. Belong provide nursing, dementia and residential care within these household communities. So touching in a little bit more in depth, each household is its own secure setting with its own access door. It has a shared open plan living, dining, kitchen space, and each resident has their own private ensuite room, and this setting offers several advantages. A more intimate environment that fosters a warm and responsive atmosphere, safety, security and peace of mind for residents and family members. And it also draws on staffing efficiencies, as households can be opened up of an evening and managed between one set of staff. And this model is implemented in the first of our case studies, which is Belong Chester. This is a unique scheme for the client too, in that it's situated in Chester city centre. It is an intergenerational village providing a household model for dementia nursing care and 24-hour support. It consists of 72 care bedrooms in 6 extended family-size household modules that we just briefly looked at. It also has 23 independent living apartments. And what's quite unique about this is there's also a 25-place nursery for children from birth up to 5 years old. This includes a sensory nature play garden specifically designed to offer shared learning experiences and opportunities for children, families and older residents. There's also central communal facilities such as bistro, gym, a salon, a community hall and spa, all of which are open to the public and local community. And this is where it gives a chance for residents in the local community and the nursery to mix as well. And then finally, here's a couple of images of that scheme produced. This is a shot from the exterior. This is a shot of that sort of nursery garden to the rear at the lower level. And then this is a shot of the inside of that sort of nursery space. And then finally, our second case study, and this is currently on site and due to complete in 2026. This is with a different client called Jewish Care. We were tasked with the redevelopment of the former Sinclair's house site to provide a new care community centre for the local Jewish community, which would comprise of a 66-bed care home providing dementia, nursing care and 24-hour support. It also provides a community centre and dementia day centre, including a bistro, a restaurant and other communal facilities that are open to the public and to the residents of the care home. The Dementia Day Centre, which is located here on screen, is open to residents within the wider community for day visit and can be opened up and linked with the wider community centre and the care home itself. And the building serves as an outreach point for the local community. And I think that covers, here's a couple of images taken from the outset of the scheme. This is a view looking towards the entrance area and the Dementia Day Centre located here. And there's a very quite early shot of some of those communal spaces that were drafted for the client. And I think that wraps up really where we were. I think, I suppose there is a mention that following this, we're currently developing a scheme which is located by Battersea Park in central London, which is one of our most recent schemes. It's been submitted for planning now and is in the public domain, and we're very much looking forward to developing that with our client. I think that covers everything. So I'd like to hand back over to Jeremy.
Thank you. And I'm looking forward to seeing the development in Battersea Park. I know there's been quite a lot of interest in different variety of later life housing along the River Thames and the south of the Thames in recent years. Thanks ever so for everybody who's already managed to post some questions into the Q&A box. They're one of two that sort of snuck in, I believe, in the chat box too. So if you haven't already sort of transferred those over, please do so, and we will try and answer those in the next sort of 10 minutes or so. I'm going to just have a quick look to see how many of these have been upvoted. I think all of them are sort of fairly one-offs or something, so we'll just go through them if that's okay, folks. So the first one is very much geared to Rachel. How would the funding cover obtaining broadband? We're having cases of individuals who are upgrading their telecare alarms from analog to digital, who have no mobile signals, so require an alarm that can go via broadband. If they cannot afford to put it in, I'm wondering what funding could be available to help them. And this very much follows a happy hour that we had on Thursday morning looking at digital readiness. So Rachel, any first thoughts on that?
It's one of those things, because the DFG is about providing asset, and it's whether that would be classed as an asset, and I doubt that it possibly would. Again, it's about how local authorities use their discretion and how they use their housing assistance policy and DFG allocation. So it's, yeah, I don't think it necessarily would be something that would be covered by DFG. Jeremy, yeah.
No, I from my understanding, that is right. There may be some discretionary funding or other access to other funding for perhaps one-off cases, but yeah, unless anybody else has any examples of that from the panel. Lizzy, Tanya, are you preparing for the digital switchover similarly?
Yeah, we are. We are from a point of you know, changing over from the pull cords and things like that, that we have the hard wiring that needs to go in, the Cat6, etc. But that is something that we get challenged with as well in relation to be able to provide Wi-Fi to all of the properties within the buildings and the affordability of that for our customers. But what we do is, where we can, is be able to provide as much access wider to the properties, but also within the communal areas for people to be able to share, the use of like computers and other things within those communal spaces is easily accessible. But it is a challenge for us as well, unfortunately.
Yeah. Emma, just one other thing is that the LIN's got a call out at the moment with a major provider looking at the state of readiness. Do have a look at that questionnaire that they've got on the LIN website. You may be able to respond to their questions, but also post the question to them, and they may have some examples around that and how to circumvent that as well. But thanks, really great question. Agnes asks, she may have missed it, but can we use the DFG for, say, sheltered housing, extra care or supported living? So this is very much about where can DFGs be applied in a social housing setting, Rachel. I think that there's some interesting things around that.
Yeah, so tenants can apply for, so if you're in social housing, then tenants can apply for disabled facilities grant just as somebody who is in their own property. One of the things that we are keen to kind of promote is landlord applications. So that's where the social landlord actually applies on behalf of their tenant, because that can often give the housing association that flexibility to ensure that whatever's been installed from an asset management point of view can be a little bit, you've got a little bit more flexibility if a landlord makes an application. So yes, somebody who is a social a tenant within a housing association property can apply for DFG. The funding, yeah, the funding route is slightly different if you're in a council property, because that has to come from the housing revenue account. But if you're in if you're in a housing association, then yes, the tenant can apply for DFG.
So again, best approach the local housing authority, or if there's a local home improvement agency.
Yeah, to have that discussion. Yeah,
great. Now, Neil, great for having you again with us. And you raise a very interesting question, and recognising that there are several different forms of dementia, and you really query whether that's recognised and accommodated in the design and delivery process. Let's stick with the design and ask Jacob that. Is that something that comes up either in training or in terms of your practice and thinking about different forms of dementia?
That's a great question. I think for us it's around, and for us and our clients, it's around design. I suppose we focus generally on the more general principles, and it's having that versatility, I suppose, within the scheme to accommodate for the varying different forms, different issues that raise with various residents, I suppose. So it's for us, it's about working with our clients closely and responding accordingly.
Yeah, no, that's good. And does anybody else on the panel have any thoughts about that in terms of recognising that or delivering differently? Because obviously I think things like becoming a dementia-friendly organisation is probably slightly more general in terms of the broader principles, but it's also, I suppose, how you fine-tune that through learning, working with Alzheimer's Society or local dementia action alliances to understand those different forms of dementia. Any other thoughts from the panel?
I don't mind, Jeremy, just adding for us, I think that was something that was part of our learning in terms of naivety, and I'm not ashamed to share that. I think that one size doesn't fit all, but also first of all, I think the first thing was around making sure that the key colleagues are trained as a starting point to actually acknowledge and understand, but also understanding which of our areas of the business are better placed to have a more flexibility around their approach. And when I say that, I'm thinking more of our extra care, our extra care schemes in terms of trying to support and retain our customers to stay in those properties for longer is an area where we probably need to we have given more focus on in what we need to change as opposed to like our general needs, etc. So it's just understanding where the focus needs to be within those buildings and making sure our staff are aware and knowing what picking up. But I think that the other key thing was for us, and again for learning, was and I hadn't thought about this until we'd done the training, was our customers becoming dementia friends and understanding for them to understand the differences as well was a really big key point, because I think that our customers who live in some of those environments can become really frustrated with their neighbours and not understand, and that was really key learning for them. And the other thing that we did, myself and another dementia champion did do some work with Teepa Snow to understand the differences was probably a big learning for us.
Thanks. That's really helpful. We're going to go back into looking at the design mode, and Adam raises an interesting question about some of the design features and the sort of essential requirements. But he also says, you know, if you could, what one feature would keep people most safely at home? And I'm sure there isn't one. There's I think, Jacob, you highlighted a dozen or so, and I know that the APPG report had an annex looking at design principles, and each of us have heard from, you know, sort of whether it's adapting an existing home. But Rachel, just from your point of view, you know, and your practical experience, anything specifically that stands out for you?
I think lighting tends to be one that we can, because like you say, I think sometimes we kind of think about the kind of physical architectural features, but I think sometimes it is just kind of really sensible things around lighting in its broadest sense, in terms of really good general lighting, task lighting, and actually getting that right, I think can have a huge impact in terms of just impact on everyday activities. So I think that one would be the bit that I think sometimes we overlook, and you know, kind of focus on kind of more the physical aspects of the architecture.
Yeah, and Lizzy or Tanya?
I think for me, it's an interesting one where Rachel was talking about the lighting. Sometimes it can become really conflicting as well in managing the wider building.
Yeah.
So what we may have is other customers saying that especially where there's service charge and shared costs, where customers are saying, can we have the sensory lighting that goes off, because it will then reduce our amenities. And then that was one of the big things that I picked up around lighting's really key, and it's a simple approach, but then, like say, you're then challenged with the rest of the building. So
yeah, I was also struck by all your presentations, and Jacob, I'll come to you in a minute. You know, the intersectionality between dementia and sight impairment, and the thinking much more around inclusive and universal design. So, Jacob, is there anything coming through around that might also pick out one or two things that you would recommend?
I think from a personal perspective, it's having those cues. It's having those cues for the individual that's living with dementia, or whether that's for, you know, it's the visual cues of you know, ease of access to bathrooms, whether that's kind of within the bedroom itself, or whether that's within the wider scheme. You know, you're more likely to use some of the day spaces, you know, if you've got access to those, and it becomes a lot easier. You know, it's things like as well, food preparation. If that's happening kind of around and close and nearby, then you're more likely to, you know, register that you're hungry, or that you're, you know, will be eating shortly. And whether that's or whether it's, you know, ensuring that they're drinking enough water, you know, having those kind of visual things taking place around you makes that sort of journey throughout the day much more comfortable.
Look, we're fast approaching 5 o'clock, and we've still got 2 or 3 questions I want to sort of go through. If I may have your permission just to ask a couple of those, because I think one of them, in particular from Imogen, and good afternoon, Imogen, is about involving customers and people in the design process, organisational development. And I know, as members of the Department of the Dementia Housing Working Group, Ruth Ely and her work with Tide together in Dementia Every Day, so very much actively involves carers in the process, and also some of the work that Joseph Rowntree Foundation have done through the DEEP project, you know, about how to engage people. There are some sort of standard sort of approaches, but I'm also just thinking, following on from Imogen's example, is there sort of ways that you are co-producing within Accent, for example? If we can kick off with you.
Yeah, with something we're fairly early stages in relation to that, but what we needed to do is make sure that we had a really robust customer group to engage with. So the last 18 months, we've got a national independent living service group, and also Accent has just recently introduced a really robust engagement team. We've got a head of customer engagement, and regionally we've got groups where that feeds into the wider business in relation to the key points, not just around policy procedures, but also the delivery development and things to consider. So we've not got it right yet. We something we are working on, but absolutely is the top of our list in terms of co-producing and customer influencing. But we've got the groups. The first thing is getting the groups and getting them strengthened to begin with, building the confidence, which is what we've got, and that's our forum to be able to go back to utilise going forward.
Thanks very much. And our final question, if I may, is I'm going to try and cluster this one because Helen raises some really interesting things that are happening in Stoke-on-Trent. And perhaps, Helen, you can share that with the LIN, because that will make a nice little Housing LIN case study perhaps as well. And I'm sure the Dementia and Housing Working Group would love to know a little more about this. And it's about how you're adapting bathrooms to cognitive impairment. And Rachel, I'm thinking that's again something that OTs working closely with transfer of care from hospital into the community. Helen talks about short stay units. Well, read short stay unit, intermediate care, step down facilities. Can you think about how we can sort of draw on that practice within an adaptations area?
I think, well, it's really positive to see the work that Stoke-on-Trent is doing, and I think probably what Helen would say is, I think there's always this thing, isn't that this myth that designing well or designing for dementia is going to cost more, but often it is just, as I said, it's just that bit around kind of just doing it thoughtfully. And again, like you say, Jeremy, it would really be really good to kind of have that work that they're doing in Stoke-on-Trent as a case study, because I think often when we talk about dementia design, actually it's kind of just good design, isn't it, in terms of just really simple principles, but just applying them thoughtfully to an adaptation, be it you're adapting somebody's existing environment, or whether you're in a fortunate position of being able to kind of design from scratch, as Jacob's demonstrated this afternoon.
Well, look, I hope you don't mind. We've overrun by a few minutes, but I think the questions themselves were really great. And can I thank each of you for taking time to respond to those, but also for your presentations. They're really stimulating. This is, as I said, the penultimate happy hour of this series. We are planning already for our next series, and there will be one with the Dementia Housing Working Group to coincide with Dementia Action Week next year. So again, you were thinking ahead about how we can sort of really continue the sharing of good practice and information that's happening. If this is the first time that you've joined a happy hour, please do join us again next Tuesday when we'll be coinciding with Happy Awareness Week, and we'll be putting the spotlight on housing for older people and the recent award-winning Appleby Blue, and we'll be talking to the architect there in a session chaired by Lord Best on how can we design to the happy design principles. And we'll also be looking at somebody's journey into their own journey into retirement housing, as well as looking some work ongoing around age-friendly Manchester, as well as other activities as well. So we've got a really wide-ranging session for you next week, and I hope you can join us. But that leaves me just to say thank you to each of our speakers, Tanya, Lizzy, Jacob and Rachel, who kicked it all off. Can I thank Sally and the team behind the scenes who've maintained a really great session this afternoon. And you can see the applause that you're all getting in the reactions on the screen. That's lovely to know, and look forward to seeing you at the next one. Bye, everybody.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks, all.
Everyone.